3 knocks. So soft against the service door that the storm nearly ate them whole. And if I hadn't been standing right there at the deep sink with my hands in cold dishwater, I'd have missed them and gone on with my night. And the old man on the other side of that door would have died in the rain like the Whitlock family wanted all people like him to die, quietly, somewhere else where the rich don't have to look. But the knocks came, and I heard them, and I opened the door. And by the time the sun came up over the soaked hills the next morning, that drowned old beggar I pulled out of the storm had taken a single pen to a single piece of paper and burned the entire Whitlock family down to the ground, and handed me a life I never in my worst, smallest dreams believed I'd be allowed to have. Let me back up. Because to understand what happened in that pantry between midnight and dawn, you have to understand the kind of house I worked in and the kind of girl I'd been beaten into being. Rain had been hammering the valley for 2 days straight. The kind of October storm that turns the back roads to soup and knocks the power out in the poor part of the county while the big estates run their generators and never feel a thing. Wind coming sideways off the ridge. Thunder that rattled the good china in the cabinets. From the kitchen windows of the Whitlock house, you could watch the lightning walk across the whole valley, and on a normal night I'd have stood there a minute and watched it, because it was beautiful and free and nobody could dock my pay for looking. This was not a normal night. My name is Hazel Mabry. I was 23 years old that autumn, and I'd spent the better part of 2 years as a live-in maid at Holloway House, the Whitlock family estate, 40 rooms of cold marble and colder people sitting on a hill above a town that mostly hated them. If you've ever been looked through like you were a smudge on a window, like you weren't a person so much as a problem somebody else had to manage, then you already understand this story better than the Whitlocks ever could. Stick around, because the way it ends is the kind of thing you'll want to tell someone. And if you're the type who quietly roots for the people nobody ever sees coming, do me a favor and tap that subscribe button now, so you're still here when the sun comes up. Now, how does a girl end up scrubbing pots in a house full of people who'd step over her if she dropped? Dead on the foyer floor? The same way most of us end up anywhere we hate. Money. My grandmother raised me. Opal Mabry. Best cook in 3 counties and proud of it. A woman who spent 40 years feeding other people's families in other people's kitchens and came home every night smelling like bread and bacon grease and never once complained. My mother left when I was small and my father was a roomer, so it was Opal and me in a little house with a crooked porch, and what she couldn't give me in money, she gave me in something I didn't understand the worth of until much later. She had a rule, one rule above all the others. Whenever a knock came at our door, a tramp off the rail line, a neighbor down on his luck, a stranger with rain in his shoes, Opal fed them. Every time. Didn't matter if it was the last of the soup. Didn't matter if they looked rough, or smelled like the bottle, or couldn't meet your eye. She'd sit them at our scarred little table and put a bowl in front of them, and while they ate, she'd talk to them like they were the mayor come for dinner. Hazel, she told me once, you remember this. Anybody can be kind to a person who can pay them back. That's just business. The only kindness that counts for anything is the kind you give to somebody who's got nothing. Nothing to offer you, nothing to give you, no way to ever return it. How you treat a person who can do nothing for you. That's the whole truth of who you are. That's the only test that matters. And most folks fail it without ever knowing they were being tested. She kept her recipes in a dented old tin box, the paint worn down to bare metal at the corners from 50 years of her hands. When the cancer took her, slow and mean and expensive, that tin was about all she left me. That tin and a stack of medical bills tall enough to bury a person. 18 years old and alone and owing more money than I'd ever seen, I did the only thing I could. I went into service, same as Opal. And the Whitlocks were hiring. Here's the part I'm not proud of. When Vivian Whitlock offered me the live-in position, she also offered me what she called an advance. Money to clear the worst of the debt collectors who'd started calling about Opal's bills. I took it. Of course I took it. And that advance, with the interest she quietly attached to it, turned me into something not far from owned. Every month she took a piece of my wages back toward it, and every month the balance barely moved, and any time I so much as flinched she'd remind me, in that smooth, cool voice, exactly how much I owed and exactly how easy it would be for a girl with my history of debt to find herself with no job, no roof, and a ref that would follow her like a bad smell. So I kept my head down, I scrubbed and I served and I disappeared for 2 years. Vivian Whitlock ran that house like a small, cold kingdom. Widowed, 60-some, beautiful in the hard way that expensive women stay beautiful. With a smile she used like a knife. Her son Spencer lived there too, 31, soft-handed, mean the way only a man who's never worked a day can be mean. The kind who'd had everything and somehow still walked around furious that it wasn't the more. And running the staff under Vivian was the head housekeeper, Mrs. Pell, who decided long ago that the safest place to stand in a cruel house was right behind the cruelty, and who took it out on us girls because the family took it out on her. That was Holloway House. That was my whole world. And that October, The whole world was holding its breath because Mr. Thorne was coming. I didn't know much about him. Staff weren't told things. Staff were told to polish. But you could not hear it in the panic that had gripped the family for 2 solid weeks. Silas Thorne. A name spoken in that house the way other people say the name of God. Some kind of investor, an old recluse who almost never left his home and almost never said yes to anyone. And for reasons nobody explained to me, the entire future of the Whitlock family apparently hung on whether this man could be convinced to sign something the next morning. I caught pieces of it, the way you catch pieces of everything when you're invisible. Vivian on the phone behind the study door, her voice tight in a way I'd never heard it. If Thorne doesn't sign, we lose the house. We lose all of it. Do you understand me? There is no other buyer. There is no other money. This is the last door, and it is closing. Spencer slamming things. The accountant who came and left looking gray. The whole gleaming house was a stage set, I started to realize, and behind it the Whitlocks were drowning in something, and Silas Thorne was the only rope left. And he was coming at 9 the next morning, with his lawyer and his papers, to decide whether to throw it to them. They'd spent 2 weeks getting ready to grovel, new flowers daily, the good silver out, a menu planned and replanned. And because they were terrified, and terrified people are cruel, that whole 2 weeks had been a special kind of hell for those of us downstairs, Mrs. Pell screaming over a water spot on a goblet, Spencer throwing a plate at the wall because the eggs were a shade too firm. Vivian docking a week's pay from a girl named Lucia because a single rose had wilted in an arrangement Vivian herself had picked. And 6 days before the storm, the thing happened that I keep coming back to. The thing that tells you everything. A man came to the front gate. On foot, in the rain, an older fellow with a cardboard sign and a story about his truck breaking down on the highway and needing a few dollars for a bus. Just a poor man having a hard day. I was bringing in the mail and I saw the whole thing. Vivian came out onto the portico under an umbrella Spencer held for her, looked at this man dripping at her gate like he was something the dog had brought up onto the lawn. And she said, I will never forget it. She said, we don't feed strays here. If you're not gone in 2 minutes, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. People like you should know better than to come where you're not wanted. People like you. She had the man marched off her property in the rain. And then she turned to me, because I'd frozen there with the mail in my hands, and she said, don't look so wounded, Hazel. Charity is just teaching the helpless to stay helpless. The world has an order. Learn your place in it. If you've made it this far and your jaw is tight right now, then you and I are built the same, and I need you to hold on to that feeling, because it pays off. But keep watching, because the whole point of what happened next is that Vivian Whitlock was about to learn, in the most exquisite way, exactly how wrong she had that order. That same night, after the man at the gate, I sat on the edge of my narrow bed in the servants' wing and counted the months I had left to go on the advance, the way some people count sheep. By my own arithmetic, even skipping nothing, even spending on nothing, I had 4 more years of the Whitlocks ahead of me before that debt was clear. 4 more years. Learn your place. Lucia knocked on my door around midnight. She'd been crying over the docked week's pay, the one Vivian took for the wilted rose, because that money had been meant for a little boy's winter coat. We sat together in the dark, and I gave her what cash I'd folded in Opal's tin, which wasn't much, and she tried to refuse it, and then she didn't, because pride is a luxury and a coat is a coat. How do you stand it, Hazel? She whispered before she went back to her room. How do you wake up every day and walk back into this house? I didn't have an answer for her. The honest answer was that I'd stopped letting myself feel it, mostly. You can get used to nearly anything if the alternative is the street. That's not strength. That's just a different kind of drowning, the slow kind, the kind you don't notice until somebody pulls you out. The next morning, Vivian had us polish every doorknob in the house with vinegar and newspaper because Mr. Thorne, she said, would notice things like doorknobs. We polished 40 rooms worth of brass on our knees while she walked behind us pointing out streaks. Spencer spent the week practicing what he called his warm laugh in front of the hall mirror, this awful rehearsed bark, because his mother had told him that men like Thorne respond to charm. The whole house, top to bottom, 2 solid weeks, bent every muscle it had toward fooling one old man into thinking the Whitlocks were good people worth saving. Nobody once considered simply being good people. The thought wasn't available to them. It wasn't in the house. 6 days after the man at the gate, storm came, and with it, 3 soft knocks on the service door at the back of the house, just past midnight. Everyone else was asleep. Or at least upstairs, the family in their wing, Mrs. Pell in her rooms off the laundry, the day girls gone home. I was the only one still up, finishing the last of the pots from the family's late dinner, because Vivian liked the kitchen spotless before the morning. So when I heard the knocking, soft and uncertain under the howl of the wind, there was no one to hear it but me. I almost didn't open it. I want to be honest about that. My first thought wasn't kindness. My first thought was, If Mrs. Pell catches me opening that door to a stranger, I'll lose a week's pay, and I can't lose a week's pay. So my hand actually came off the latch, and then the knock came again. Weaker this time, the knock of someone running out of strength, and over the wind I heard a voice, old, thin, half-drowned. Please, anybody, I just need to get out of the rain. Opal's voice came up in me then, the way it always did at the wrong, brave, expensive moments. How you treat a person who can do nothing for you. I opened the door. A man stood on the step, and drowned is the only word for him. Old, 70 at least, soaked through to the bone. White hair plastered flat to his skull, a thin coat gone black with water and hanging off him like it, weighed 50 pounds, mud to the knees. He was shaking so hard I could hear his teeth. Whatever he'd once been, that night he looked exactly like the strays Vivian had thrown into the rain, and every rule of that house said I should shut the door in his face. My car, he managed, his voice rattling, went off the road, 2 miles back. Hit a tree. I've been walking. I saw the lights. His knees started to go. He grabbed the door frame. I caught him. Skinny old arm, cold as a fish, shaking. And I made the decision that changed my whole life without knowing that's what I was doing. I pulled him inside, out of the storm, and I shut the door against the wind. Quiet, I whispered. Please, sir, you've got to be quiet. The people who own this house, they can't know you're here. They'll throw you back out and dock my pay for opening the door. Can you walk? Just to the pantry. It's warm in there by the boiler. He nodded, teeth chattering, and leaned on me, and I half carried him across the dark kitchen into the big walk-in pantry off the back, the warmest room in that whole cold house, because the boiler ran along the back wall of it. I sat him on an overturned crate by the warm pipes, and I shut the pantry door, and there, in the small safe dark, I finally let myself breathe, the state of him, lips going blue, hands he couldn't hold still. A man that age, that cold, that wet. Opal had nursed enough sick folk for me to know he wasn't far from real trouble. Off came the soaked coat. From the laundry just outside the pantry, I grabbed an armful of clean kitchen towels and a folded wool blanket the day girls used on their breaks, and I wrapped him up, rubbing his arms through the wool to get the blood moving the way Opal taught me. Up on the boiler pipes went his coat to dry, and while I worked, I kept up a low, steady stream of nonsense talk, the way you talk to a spooked animal, telling him he was all right now. He was inside, he was safe. Just get warm, just breathe. Slowly, the shaking eased, color crept back into his face, and the whole time, through it all, this old man watched me with a pair of pale gray eyes that were a great deal sharper and steadier than the rest of him, eyes that didn't miss a thing, and I was too busy to wonder why a half-frozen beggar had eyes like a man doing sums. You'll catch your death of hunger too, I expect, I said, once I was sure he wasn't going to keel over. When did you last eat? Yesterday, he said, morning, that settled it. Storm or no storm, debt or no debt, no soul was going hungry at my door. Opal's tin box lived on the pantry's high shelf. I'd brought it with me to that house because it was the only family I had left, and I took it down, and I knew without looking what I'd make. The soup, Opal's soup, the one she ladled out to every stray who ever knocked, potato and bacon and whatever the garden gave, thick enough to stand a spoon in. There was a pot of it cooling on the back of the stove that I'd made for the staff's supper. Quietly, by the light of the open boiler, I warmed a big bowl and carried it in to him with a heel of bread, the way he ate. Lord, the way he ate that soup, slow at first, then steady. Both hands around the warm bowl, his eyes closing at the first taste like a man stepping into a hot bath after a year in the cold. When he was halfway down the bowl, he stopped and looked at it and looked at me, and something moved across his old face that I couldn't read. This, he said quietly, is the best thing I have eaten in a very long time. Did you make it? My grandmother's recipe, I said. She fed half the county out of that pot, one bowl at a time, had a rule about it. And I told him Opal's rule, sitting there on a flour sack in the warm dark while the storm beat itself against the high pantry window. Anybody can be kind to a person who can pay them back. The only kindness that counts is the kind you give to somebody who's got nothing. I don't know why I told him. Maybe because nobody in 2 years had asked me a single real question, and here was a stranger asking, and the words just came. He listened to all of it without a word, and when I finished he was quiet a long moment, and then he said, almost to himself, "A wise woman, your grandmother. There aren't many left who believe that." He took another spoonful. "May I ask you something? While I'm trespassing in your kitchen." "It's not my kitchen," I said, "but ask. This family, the ones who can't know I'm here." Those pale eyes again, steady on me. What are they like? The truth now, not the polished answer. Maybe I should have lied, a loyal servant lies. But I was so tired, and the night was so strange, and there's a kind of honesty that only happens at 1 in the morning with a stranger you'll never see again. So I told him the truth. I told him about Vivian and her advance that had made me into something close to property. About the wages docked over wilted flowers and water spot. About Spencer and his thrown plates. About Lucia losing a week's pay over a single rose. And, I don't know what made me say it, about the man at the gate 6 days back, the poor soul in the rain with the cardboard sign. And, "We don't feed strays here." And people like you should know better. And charity is just teaching the helpless to stay helpless. I told him all of it, sitting in the warm dark, and the old man listened to every word with a stillness that was almost frightening, and his face gave away nothing at all. And yet, he said softly when I was done, you opened the door to me. My grandmother's rule, I said. Not theirs. He nodded slowly, and for just a moment those gray eyes weren't sharp at all. They were sad. What's your name? Hazel Mabry. Hazel. He said it like he was filing it somewhere careful. I'm Silas. The name went past me completely. I was 23 and exhausted, and the name Thorne had only ever reached me as a panicked whisper through closed doors. I'd never once heard a first name attached to it. To me, he was just Silas, sweet half-drowned old man eating my grandmother's soup. I had no idea. None that I was sitting in a pantry with the most powerful man for 100 miles. The one man on earth the Whitlocks were on their knees praying to. The man with their entire future in his coat pocket, drying on my boiler pipes. We talked for a long time after that, Silas and I. Or mostly I talked, and he asked the gentlest questions, and slowly the whole shape of my life came out. Opal, the bills, the advance, the trap, the way I'd stopped letting myself want anything, because wanting things only got you hurt. And he told me one story back, about being a young man, long ago, broken, beaten, and far from home, sleeping rough in a rail yard in the dead of winter, certain he was finished. And a woman who worked in a diner near the tracks, a woman with nothing herself, who'd seen him through the window and brought him out a plate of food and a cup of coffee on her own dime and sat with him while he ate and told him the cold wouldn't last forever. I never even got her name. He said, I've spent a great deal of my life since then trying to be worth that plate of food. Some years I've done better than others. He looked into the empty bowl. I'd forgotten lately what it felt like to be on the receiving end of it, to be no one, and be fed anyway. He set the bowl down. Thank you, Hazel. You've reminded me of something I'd let myself forget. I didn't understand him. I just thought he was a tired old man getting sentimental over soup. I refilled his bowl. We talked a while longer about smaller things. He asked what I'd wanted to be before the bills, before the house, and I had to think hard, because nobody had asked me that since Opal, and the answer surprised me coming out of my own mouth. A cook, I said. My own kitchen. A place with a screen door that banged and a chalkboard menu and regulars who knew my name. A place that smelled like Opal's. Saying it out loud felt dangerous, like taking something out of a locked drawer and letting a stranger see it. He didn't laugh. He nodded, slow, like a man filing away a measurement, and said that was a fine thing to want, and that most people wanted things much smaller and much worse. I didn't know what to make of him. I poured myself half a cup of the cold coffee from the afternoon's pot just to have something to do with my hands, and for a little while the two of us just sat in the warm dark and listened to the storm throw itself at the house. And it was, I realized later, the most peace I'd felt in 2 years. That peace didn't last. Footsteps in the corridor outside the kitchen, slow, deliberate, the soft, slippered tread of Mrs. Pell, who slept light and prowled the house at night, convinced the girls were stealing. The boiler had clicked off and the kitchen had gone quiet, and into that quiet her footsteps came closer, and a thin blade of flashlight beam swept under the gap of the kitchen door. My heart stopped dead. Silas saw my face and went still as furniture, soup bowl frozen halfway up. I had just enough time to ease the pantry door to within an inch of shut and step out into the dark kitchen, pressing my back against the counter before Mrs. Pell's beam found me. Hazel, suspicion dripping off the single word. What are you doing standing in the dark? Couldn't sleep, Mrs. Pell. Came down for water. Didn't want to wake the house with the lights. The flashlight beam crawled over me, over the counters, over the closed pantry door not 3 feet from where she stood, behind which an old man sat wrapped in a stolen blanket holding his breath. The beam paused on that door. My whole life paused on that door. If she opened it, if she found him, I would be out in the storm before sunrise, debt called in, reference poisoned, and the freezing man inside thrown out behind me. For one endless second the light held on the latch. Get to bed, she said finally, the beam swinging away. And if I find so much as a spoon out of place in the morning, it's coming out of your wages. Her slippers shuffled off down the corridor, the light faded, gone. I stood in the dark until I could breathe again, then slipped back into the pantry. Silas looked at me with something new in his face. Not fear, he hadn't been afraid, but a kind of dawning understanding of exactly how much I was risking in real time to keep a stranger warm. You could lose everything for this, he said quietly for me. Probably, I said and sat back down on the flour sack. Eat your soup before it goes cold. Around 2 in the morning it nearly all came apart for good. Footsteps on the back stairs. The drunk, heavy, uneven tread I knew too well, Spencer. I'd just enough warning to shove the half-empty bowl behind a sack of flour and pull the pantry door nearly shut, Silas going still as a stone in the dark behind it, before the kitchen light snapped on and Spencer Whitlock came lurching in for the bottle he kept, hidden from his mother above the icebox. "The hell are you doing up?" He saw me by the pantry, swaying, a glass already in his hand. Skulking around in the dark, stealing probably, you people always are. Just finishing the pots, sir. Eyes down, small, invisible. The 2-year armor. Pots, he snorted, weaving closer, and the smell of bourbon came off him like heat off a road. You know what tomorrow is? Hazel. Tomorrow the old crow signs and we're saved, and you're still going to be exactly what you are. Nothing. You know how much you still owe my mother? You'll be scrubbing my pots when you're 50. You'll die owing us. He grabbed my arm, hard, his fingers digging in, close enough now that I could see the broken veins in his eyes, and gave me a shake. So show some gratitude. We could put you out in the rain tonight, and nobody in this world would ever ask where you went. He held my arm too long, and it hurt. And there was nothing I could do but stand there and take it and wait for it to be over, the way I'd stood there and taken everything for 2 years, because the alternative was the road and the dark and the bills with no roof over them. He let go, sloshed more bourbon in his glass, knocked it back, sneered at me one more time and lurched back toward the stairs. The lights snapped off, his footsteps faded up and away. And in the dark of the pantry, I heard the old man breathe out, very slow. I'd nearly forgotten he was there. I pulled the door open, my arm still throbbing, my eyes hot with the tears I wouldn't let fall in front of Spencer, and Silas was sitting exactly where I'd left him, wrapped in the wool blanket, but he was not the same man. The sadness was gone out of those gray eyes. What was there instead was cold, not cruel. Cold the way deep water's cold, the way a verdict is cold. He had heard every word. He had seen the whole thing, the grab, the shake. The "you'll die" owing us. The casual promise to put a girl out in the rain to die. Does he do that often? Silas asked quietly. Put his hands on you. It's fine, I said, rubbing my arm. It's just how it is here. I shouldn't have said all those things earlier, sir. Please, if they knew I talked about the family, I'd Hazel. He said my name and it stopped me. You have nothing to be afraid of, not from me. Not, I think, for very much longer, from any of them. He stood slowly, steadier now, the blanket around his shoulders like a king's robe in a story, and for the first time all night, the old beggar didn't look like a beggar at all. I'd like to ask one more kindness of you, and then I'll let you sleep. The papers in the inside pocket of my coat, would you bring them to me? And is there, in this house, working telephone I might use, very quietly before dawn? Confused, I fetched the coat off the warm pipes. From the inside pocket came a thick folded packet of papers, the legal kind, dense with small print, dry because the inner pocket had stayed dry against his chest. He took them with a steady hand, and as he unfolded them under the boiler light, I cut at the top of the first page, in heavy black type, a name. 2 words I'd heard whispered like a prayer through every closed door in that house for 2 weeks, Silas Thorne. The floor seemed to tilt under me. My voice came out as barely anything. I had a 9 o'clock appointment with this family in the morning, he said almost gently, watching my face do its math. My car had other ideas, the storm, the tree, the long walk. Something almost like a smile. I'll confess something to you, Hazel. When I saw the lights of this house, and I understood whose house it was, a wicked old part of me decided to keep quiet. To come to the back door looking like exactly what I appeared to be, a wet old nobody, and to see, before I signed anything, how these people treat a person who can do nothing for them. My own grandmother's rule, you might say. I've used it my whole life. People show you their truest face the moment they decide you don't matter. The cold came back into his eyes. The Whitlocks have shown me theirs. Tonight, and at that gate 6 days ago, and on that young woman's arm not 20 minutes past, and you showed me yours. The papers in his hands, I would learn, were the rescue. Sign them at 9 in the morning, and Silas Thorne would pour enough money into the sinking Whitlock fortune to keep Holloway House standing, and the family in their marble for another generation. There was no other buyer. There was no other money. He was, as Vivian had hissed into the phone, the last door, and it was closing. He found the phone in the butler's pantry, and in a low, even voice, in the gray hours before dawn, he made 2 calls, one to his lawyer, who I gathered was already at a hotel in town for the morning's meeting, and one to a man whose title I didn't catch, but whose job, it became clear, was to make things happen fast and quietly. And then he sat down at the little staff table where I ate my lonely meals, with the rescue papers spread out in front of him and my grandmother's empty soup bowl pushed to the side, and he took a pen from his pocket. And by the cold gray light coming up in the windows, he began to sign, not the rescue. The lawyer arrived at the service door at 7:30 with a fresh set of papers and a face that asked no questions, and what Silas Thorne signed that dawn was something else entirely. He signed his decision to walk away from the Whitlocks and let the house fall. The loans they couldn't pay coming due, the last door shut, and he signed something else besides. Something he and the lawyer put together in low voices at my little table while I stood there not understanding the half of it. He'd asked me, near the end, only one question. The full amount you owe this family, Hazel. The advance and all its interest. Do you know the figure? I told him. I'd known it to the dollar for 2 years. The way you know the bars of your own cage. He wrote it down, and he signed. At 9 o'clock that morning, the Whitlock family came downstairs. I wish you could have seen it. I've replayed it 1,000 times, and I'll keep it the rest of my life. Vivian, sweeping into the grand front parlor in her best pale gray suit, every hair in place, her knife of a smile already fixed on. Spencer behind her in a fresh suit nursing his hangover, both of them braced to grovel before the great Silas Thorne and walk away saved. And there, in the best chair by the cold fireplace, sat the wet old beggar their maid had hidden in the pantry, dry now in his own dried coat, calm as a winter pond, with his lawyer at his elbow and a stack of signed papers on the table before him. The color left Vivian's face one shade at a time. You could watch her mind refuse it and then accept it and then understand it, all in about 4 terrible seconds. Spencer just stood there with his mouth open like a fish on a dock. Mr. Thorne, Vivian started, her voice cracking right down the middle. There's been some, surely there's been no mistake, Silas said. He didn't raise his voice. He never once raised his voice. Men with that kind of power never have to. I arrived early last night, Mrs. Whitlock. My car left the road in the storm. I came to your service door, half frozen, looking like a man who could do nothing for anyone. Do you know who let me in? He let the silence sit. Not you. You 6 days ago threatened to have a man arrested for standing wet at your gate. We don't feed strays here. Fud, I believe were your words. People like you should know better. Your son, a few years ago, took hold of your maid's arm hard enough to bruise it and promised to put her out in the rain to die, and laughed. That is how this family treats a person it has decided does not matter. He folded his hands. I make it a lifelong habit never to do business with such people. The deal is dead. I won't be saving you. The loans you cannot pay are now, as of this morning, somebody else's problem to call in, and they will. You can't, Spencer choked out. Do you have any idea? We'll lose everything. Yes, Silas said. You will. That is rather the point. And then he turned and looked across that grand cold room and found me where I stood frozen in the doorway in my plate gray uniform with a bruise coming up purple on my arm, and his old face changed completely, the cold all melting out of it. There is one more thing. This young woman, Hazel Mabry, opened her door to a stranger who could give her nothing, fed him with the last of her grandmother's soup, and asked for nothing in return. While the lot of you slept, she showed me the only kind of character that has ever impressed me in 80 years of meeting impressive people. He slid a paper across the table toward Vivian, who took it with a shaking hand. Her debt to you, the advance, and every dollar of that interest you used to chain her, I've purchased it in full. It's mine now, and I've forgiven it, every cent. She owes you nothing, she never did, but now it's true on paper, he stood. She's free of you. As of this morning, so am I. The room was so quiet you could hear the rain dripping off the eaves outside, the storm finally spent. If you've ever wanted, just once, to watch the people who stepped on you, understand exactly what they'd done and exactly what it was going to cost them. If you've ever needed to believe that the world keeps a longer memory than the cruel ones think, then share this story with someone who needs to believe it too. Send it to the person in your life who treats the busboy and the billionaire exactly the same because they're rarer than they should be, and they ought to know somebody sees it. I'd love to tell you I said something powerful in that moment. I didn't. I just stood there and cried, in front of all of them, the bruise on my arm and 2 years of swallowed everything coming up all at once. The Whitlocks lost the house. Not that morning, these things grind slow, but within the year. The loans came due and there was no Silas Thorne to save them, and it turned out there'd been nothing under their gleaming life but debt and appearances all along. Holloway House and everything in it went to auction. Vivian moved into a condominium in a town where nobody knew to be afraid of her, which I imagine was its own particular hell for a woman like that. Spencer I lost track of and was glad to. The order of the world that Vivian had lectured me about, the one where she was on top forever and people like me stayed helpless at the bottom, it turned out that order was just a story the comfortable tell themselves, and stories can end. Mine didn't end in that parlor. That was where it started. Silas Thorne didn't make me rich, in case that's where you think this is going. I want to be honest with you, because the truth is better than the fairy tale. He didn't hand me a fortune and ride off. What he did was harder and kinder than that. He paid off Opal's last bills, found out about them somehow and quietly cleared them, so my grandmother's dying wasn't a debt I dragged behind me anymore, and then he offered me a job. A real one. Because it turned out the half-drowned old man in my pantry owned, among a great many things, small chain of roadside diners and inns scattered along the highways of 3 states, built, he told me, in honor of a woman in a diner by a rail yard whose name he never got, and he was looking for someone to help run them, someone who understood, all the way down in her bones, that you feed the person who knocks, that how you treat the one who can do nothing for you is the whole truth of who you are. I can't think of anyone better qualified, he said, than Opal Mabry's granddaughter. That was 6 years ago. I run 9 of those places now. 9 kitchens, full of warmth and noise and the smell of bread, where the rule on the wall in every single one, I had it painted in every one, says that no person goes hungry at our door, and we mean it, and we've meant it through more cold nights and broken down cars and folks at the end of their rope than I could count. 2 winters ago, on a night not so different from the one that started all this, a young woman came into the diner off the county highway about an hour before closing, soaked through. A toddler on her hip and a garbage bag of clothes over her shoulder, and that particular look I knew from the inside, the look of someone counting the change in her pocket against the price of a single cup of coffee, deciding she couldn't afford to sit down. The girl behind my counter, who is 19 and good, looked at me, and I came around the counter, and I sat that young woman down in the warm booth by the window, and I put a bowl of opal soup in front of her, and a grilled cheese in front of the little one, and a coffee for her hands, and I told her it was on the house, and I sat with her while she ate the way Opal used to sit. She tried to refuse. They always try to refuse. I told her what a half-drowned old man once told me, more or less, which is that the cold doesn't last forever, and that someday she'd be on the other side of this booth, and when she was, she'd know what to do. She works for me now, that young woman. Runs the morning shift at the highway place. Her boy starts kindergarten in the fall. That's the part nobody tells you about being pulled out of the water. It doesn't end with you getting saved. It ends with you learning how to throw the rope. Opal's dented tin box sits on a shelf in my own kitchen now, in a little house with a good porch that I own, free and clear, and her soup is on the menu in all 9 places under her name. Silas and I had supper together every few months until he passed, 2 winters back, peaceful, an old man who died worth a fortune and spent his whole life trying to be worth 1 plate of food. I was in his will, not for money. He left me the tin recipe box from his own kitchen and a note that said only, "For the one who opened the door, S." Here's what I know now that I didn't know that night, standing at the latch with my hand half off it, almost too afraid of a docked paycheck to let a freezing man in from the rain. The world will tell you constantly, in 1,000 smooth voices like Vivian Whitlock's, that there's an order to things, that kindness is foolish, that the people who matter are the ones who can pay you back, that you should learn your place, and the helpless should learn theirs. It's a lie, and it's the most useful lie the comfortable ever invented because it lets them sleep. The truth is simpler and stranger. The truth is that you never ever know who's standing at your door. The truth is that the way you treat someone when you're certain they can do, nothing for you isn't a small thing you can afford to get wrong. It's the realest test you'll ever take. And the bill for failing it comes due when you least expect it, and so does the reward for passing. I didn't open that door for a reward. That's the whole point. I opened it because my grandmother taught me that a person is a person, soaked or dry, rich or ruined, then you feed the ones who knock. Be the kind of person who opens the door. Not because of who might be on the other side of it, because of who it makes you on this side of it. So that's my question for you, and I really do want to know. Drop it in the comments below. I read them, everyone. When was the last time someone showed up in your life looking like nothing, like no one, like a person who could never pay you back? And what did you do? Did you open the door, or did you decide they didn't matter? Be honest. I won't judge you. I almost shut the door myself. And if this story sat with you, stay close. There's another one coming, true as this one, about the people the world walks past and the day the walking stops. I'll see you there.